All right, everybody, great to be with you again. My name is Michael Millerman. Picking up on a topic that we covered recently on this channel, J.D. Vance and the right. I have a couple of new articles that I thought it could be interesting to go over with you. So first we have from newrepublic.com, where J.D. Vance gets his weird, terrifying, techno-authoritarian ideas. So let's have a look. Yes, Peter Thiel was the senator's benefactor, but they're both inspired by an obscure software developer who has some truly frightening thoughts about reordering society. In 2008, a software developer in San Francisco named Curtis Yarvin, writing under a pseudonym, proposed a horrific solution for people he deemed not productive: convert them into biodiesel, which can help power the Muni buses. Yarvin, a self-described reactionary and extremist who was 35 years old at the time, clarified that he was just kidding. But then he continued, the trouble with the biodiesel solution is that no one would want to live in a city whose public transportation was fueled, even just partly, by the distilled remains of its late underclass. However, it helps us describe the problem we're trying to solve. Our goal, in short, is a humane alternative to genocide. So if you know anything about Yarvin, you have to imagine him saying these things to get some sense of how seriously to take them and what exactly they mean. He then concluded that the best humane alternative to genocide is to virtualize these people, imprison them in permanent solitary confinement, where, to avoid making them insane, they would be connected to an immersive virtual reality interface so they could experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world. Let me ask you, by the way, those of you who are here listening to this, do you play video games? Do you find other ways of immersing yourself into a completely imaginary world? For example, film, obviously the internet, but for sure, film, video games, and other forms of media have something like that. I mean, it's virtual reality in a certain sort of way, immersive, hanging out in the Sphere in Las Vegas. Your own version of a permanent solitary confinement sphere, immersive virtual reality interface. Could you experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world? Well, he says that to imprison people in a permanent solitary confinement situation with immersive virtual reality interfaces would be a humane alternative to genocide. Yarvin's disturbing manifestos have earned him influential followers, chief among them tech billionaire Peter Thiel, very famous villain in certain circles and a hero in others, and his one-time Silicon Valley protege, Senator J.D. Vance, whom the Republican Party just nominated to be Donald Trump's vice president. Aha. So if Donald Trump becomes president, then you're going to have a humane genocide with a bunch of people imprisoned into immersive virtual reality interfaces, experiencing a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world. And it's going to be Curtis Yarvin's fault and Peter Thiel's fault and Donald Trump's fault. If Trump wins the election, there's little doubt that Vance will bring Yarvin's twisted techno-authoritarianism to the White House. Little doubt. There's probably some doubt. There's little doubt that Vance will bring Yarvin's twisted techno-authoritarianism to the White House. And one can imagine, with horror, what a receptive would-be autocrat like Trump might do with those ideas. So guys, I'm reading to you an article, okay, a New Republic article about these thinkers, where it's not like we're not sitting here together reading Curtis Yarvin. It's obviously that would be the better thing to do, okay? Reading Peter Thiel, reading Curtis Yarvin, thinking these issues through. Like, let's say Vance has read Yarvin and they're connected through Thiel, and that means there's now little doubt that Trump is going to be receptive to those ideas. That's, those things don't really follow so neatly one upon the other, do they? But still, it's, I think, kind of fun and interesting to read these articles anyways. So Trump's first campaign was undoubtedly a watershed moment for authoritarianism in American politics, but some thinkers on the right had been laying the groundwork for years, hoping for someone to mainstream their ideas. Yarvin was one of them. Okay, I want to pause here for a minute because I want to get serious for a minute, which is this. By the way, good to be with you, as always. There is an important question about the relationship between ideas that can be obscure, abstract, far removed from ordinary life, that could be out there, that could be dangerous, okay? The world of thinking about utopian or dystopian or however you want to put it, political potentials and possibilities and all of that. In other words, the world of, call it abstract thinking, philosophizing, theorizing, and power, the centers of power, implementation, influence. It's a serious question in the history of philosophy whether philosophers need to have and want to have their ideas implemented by powerful people. One of the great books on this topic, I'm looking around to see if I have it. Usually I have a lot of the good books right by my side here. On Tyranny by Leo Strauss. If you don't know Leo Strauss, you should look him up. Don't read this kind of article about him. He's going to tell you that he was the mastermind behind George W. Bush and the neoconservatives, and Strauss is the one who architected all of the wars in the Middle East, starting with the war in Iraq and all this sort of thing. But what you really need to know about Leo Strauss is in On Tyranny, a book that is still very topical, Strauss offers an interpretation of an ancient dialogue on tyranny by Xenophon called the Hiero. But more to our point, there's a discussion on tyranny between Leo Strauss and another thinker named Alexander Kojève. And in their exchange of letters to one another, actually, the way it works is Strauss writes a commentary on Xenophon, Kojève responds to Strauss, Strauss responds to Kojève, and then they have their letters. So when Kojève responds to Strauss and Strauss responds to Kojève, something very important is at stake. Many things, but one thing I want to point out in connection to Thiel, Vance, Yarvin, and this particular issue is the relationship between wisdom and tyranny, between philosophy and power. And why is it that the philosophers and the political men end up rubbing shoulders or needing each other? Why should this be the case? Why should somebody like Curtis Yarvin have any connection to the halls of power? And why should the people in the halls of power have any interest in somebody like Curtis Yarvin? So the problem at the deeper level of philosophy and its need for politics, it's discussed there really brilliantly in On Tyranny when Strauss talks to Kojève. And what he says ultimately is the philosopher is concerned with education, and education is also a political concern. And somehow in taking education into his hands, the philosopher makes himself a competitor to the regime, which has its own desire to educate. But I want to let you know that there's a serious component to this general problem of the relationship between abstract thinkers and their corollaries in the halls of power. And, you know, another way of thinking about it is you've got a philosopher, you've got a political man, and they're like speaking two different languages. What is Trump going to start reading Curtis Yarvin? That doesn't seem very likely. But what happens is that the ideas get mediated through a sort of middle player, a middle figure. A middle figure can be an ideologue, a middle figure can be an intellectual, a public intellectual, can be somebody like a senator who's well-read and interested in ideas and connected to the right sorts of thinkers. And somehow then you get this beautiful, to my mind, exciting, intriguing mishmash of wisdom and tyranny, philosophy and politics, power and ideas. Same with people like, for example, Alexander Dugin. As I said, you had the case of Leo Strauss. There's always more than just politics to these people, and it would be misleading to discount their political influence and political interest, intrigues, and all the rest of it. So let's go back to this article here. I just think it's kind of funny, the way the New Republic puts it. If Trump wins the election, there's little doubt that Vance will bring Yarvin's twisted techno-authoritarianism to the White House, and one can imagine what a receptive would-be autocrat like Trump might do with those ideas. It's just funny. I mean, Trump, who is up on stage talking about his part, the part in his hair, is now going to be picking up ideas from Curtis Yarvin and implementing them at the governmental level. Probably not directly, but indirectly, you never know. How important is a president? Have you seen Joe Biden recently? Okay, Trump is not Biden. Trump is something special, but still. Trump's first campaign, did we already read this? No, Trump's first campaign was undoubtedly a watershed moment for authoritarianism in American politics. But some thinkers on the right had been laying the groundwork for years, hoping for someone to mainstream their ideas, right? That's where we stopped to talk about Strauss, Kojève, and On Tyranny. Yarvin was one of them. Okay, philosophers, thinkers, they want to see their ideas implemented at times. They just do. Way back in 2012, in a speech on how to reboot the US government, Yarvin said, If Americans want to change their government, they're going to have to get over their dictator phobia. He had also written favorably of slavery and white nationalists in the late 2000s, though he has stated he's not a white nationalist himself. Yeah, I see a comment here. I just see some of them popping up about Yarvin. Somebody writes, Synoptic writes, I'm surprised people are still discussing Yarvin, to be honest. A neo-reactionary thought strikes me as quite passé nowadays. I think the reason is that there's, as I said, connections, okay? Connections. Journalists are drawing connections. Vance, Thiel, Yarvin, vast right-wing conspiracy. And suddenly, you know, tomorrow it's going to be Donald Trump reading Nick Land, something like that. So that's, I think, why Yarvin, who has been a known entity in certain circles for a long time, I should say that, you know, I was back in university when people were trying to get me to read Moldbug. Okay, so let's go back to the article. I was just addressing, well, why is it that people are still, quote unquote, still discussing Yarvin? Because of the new connections, okay? The people are trying to understand what might you expect from a Trump presidency if you have J.D. Vance as the VP, and J.D. Vance knows something about Yarvin, thinks about him favorably for some reason, you know, concerning some specific points. So that's why. Okay, let's continue in this article. Both Thiel and Vance are friends of Yarvin. And guys, if you don't know, I should say, if you've never heard of Curtis Yarvin, which is possible, I assume some of you here have, and some of you here have not. If you've never heard of Curtis Yarvin, as with anybody I ever mention on this channel, there's no ultimate substitute for just starting to read him, listening to him, turning on his interviews. Like, you might know Chris Rufo. He's a kind of known name. Chris Rufo and Curtis Yarvin had a debate in IM 1776, for example, about whether or not it's worth trying to have revolutionary action with respect to the existing institutions like Rufo is doing, or whether you need to prepare some sort of parallel regime off to the side, which kind of Yarvin, I guess, suggests. So you could look at Yarvin's debate with Rufo. You could look at Yarvin's conversation with Michael Anton on the Jack Murphy Live podcast back in the day over you know, Roman history and monarchy and dictatorship and tyranny. So there's no substitute for reading him, is what I'm trying to say, if you've never heard of him. Good luck with that, though. Both Thiel and Vance are friends of Yarvin. In The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power, reporter Max Chafkin describes Yarvin as the house political philosopher of the Thielverse, a term for the people in Thiel's orbit. In 2013, Thiel invested in Tlon, sorry about the pronunciation, okay, a software company, software startup co-founded by Yarvin. In 2016, Yarvin attended Thiel's election night party in San Francisco, where, according to Chafkin, champagne flowed once it became clear that Thiel's investment in Donald Trump would pay off. So you have some circles of influence here that are heady, okay, intellectual. So whatever else Thiel might be, read his essay, The Straussian Moment, which I covered on this channel, and you'll see that he's a thinking man, okay? You can even see that from his book 0 to 1. So you have some intellectual firepower here behind the money, the networking, the connections, and the power. So that's interesting, right? Since entering politics, Vance has publicly praised and parroted Yarvin's ideas. That was worrying enough when Vance was only a senator. Now that he could soon be a heartbeat away from the presidency, his close ties to Yarvin are more alarming than ever. Okay, so Yarvin is a scary guy for the New Republic. Superficial analyses of why certain tech billionaires are aligning with Trump tend to fixate on issues like taxes and regulations. Guys, we're going to read another article on this point, but I want to highlight it for you. Where are we here? Here. This issue, okay? Why tech billionaires are aligning with Trump. So we discussed Richard Hanania's piece on the rise of the tech right in the last live stream. Today we have another article, I think, queued up here, J.D. Vance and the Tech Trad Alliance, that we'll get to in a minute. But this phenomenon is one that is real, tech billionaires aligning with Trump. And some analyses can be superficial, tending to fixate on issues like taxes and regulations. But according to this newrepublic.com article, that's only part of the story. Tech plutocrats like Thiel and Musk already have money. Now they want power as much as money can buy. Stories about Vance tend to focus on his hard Scrabble, Ohio roots, but his relationship with Thiel and his stint in San Francisco are key to understanding his politics. Vance owes his meteoric rise to Thiel, who largely bankrolled it. As a Yale law student in 2011, he heard Thiel give a speech in which he suggested that smart people should be working in tech instead of wasting their time at elite schools. Afterward, Vance emailed Thiel, who invited him to California. Okay, one quick little thought here I wanted to share in passing about this. So as a Yale law student in 2011, Vance heard Thiel give a speech in which Thiel suggested that smart people should be working in tech instead of wasting their time at elite schools. Okay, you do have to think about that. Obviously, we're just getting the second-hand, third-hand, shortest possible formulation of it here. But where should smart people be working? Okay, you might say, well, who's a smart person, and all of that. But think about it, right? Is it a wild idea that smart people should be working in tech rather than quote unquote wasting their time at elite schools? There is some thought behind that. Okay. Afterwards, Vance emailed Thiel, who invited him to California. Following a brief stint as a lawyer, Vance moved to San Francisco. Eventually, he landed at Mithril Capital, a company co-founded by Thiel. He finished writing Hillbilly Elegy while there, and Thiel wrote a blurb praising it. When Vance moved back to Ohio and eventually started his own fund, Naria Capital, both Thiel and Mark Andreessen invested. When Vance ran for U.S. Senate in 2022, Thiel spent an unprecedented $15 million on the campaign and persuaded Trump to endorse him. Vance had previously compared Trump to Hitler. In 2024, Thiel led the charge to convince Trump to pick Vance as VP. Okay, so this is now, we start from a long time ago, 2011. It could feel like a lifetime ago to some of you. And here we are up to 2024, where Thiel leads the charge to convince Trump to pick Vance as VP. Guys, what do you think about that choice? Okay, the circles that I run in, very energized, very bullish, happy, positive, excited by the choice of Vance as VP. And you wonder, was there anybody else who would do the same sort of, have the same sort of effect and do the same sort of job? Vance is a Thiel creation, the article continues, and like his billionaire benefactor who once wrote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible," Vance embraces a radical ideology hell-bent on destroying government as we know it. And they got these ideas, at least in part, from Yarvin. So you guys see what a tangled web we weave. Thiel is all in on Vance. Thiel and Vance both friends with Yarvin. This radical ideology hell-bent on destroying government as we know it. Would that be such a bad thing? What is government as we know it? Assassination attempt on Trump. Complete failure of the Secret Services to protect him. Total debacle. Highly suspicious. Then what? Biden? What's government as we know it? Joe Biden disappeared for several days, resigned with what looked like a fake signature on letter with no letterhead. Nobody knows what's going on. And who's going to replace him? The star of the comedy show Veep. And this is government as we know it, at the highest levels of visibility. And that's what we should be protecting at all costs. Well, maybe there's room for improvement. Who knows something about where there's room for improvement? You might think that people in tech know a little bit about that. I mean, you don't have to be a tech optimist or a tech pessimist or think that tech's going to destroy everybody or be afraid of a post-human technological dystopia to think that people who are in tech and in business in a real way, entrepreneurs, startup investors, that they know something about improving. I mean, they have to know something. Take Elon Musk. Elon Musk who's come out in support of Trump. Does he know something about how to take a situation that's broken and improve it slightly? Make something that functions to a certain extent? I know he's got his detractors. Have his detractors put rockets into space anytime recently? Do his detractors believe that the government space agency is doing a better job than SpaceX is doing? So, there's something to be said for wanting to destroy government as we know it, quote unquote. Not as a radical anarchist, okay? Yarvin is the chief thinker behind an obscure, I'm just making the case here to make this article more fun, all right? You know what I mean? I'm not telling you that, yes, go out and radically destroy government as you know it. I'm just saying it's not outlandish in the hands of intelligent people to think that there's room for improvement, but that to improve it, you really have to break down what's not working. Yarvin is the chief thinker behind an obscure but increasingly influential far-right neo-reaction, or capital N, capital R, small x movement, that some call the Dark Enlightenment. Among other things, by the way, I haven't read, one of the people here behind the Dark Enlightenment is Nick Land, right? We'll pull that up in case there's something here. Maybe we'll read that, Silicon Valley Safe Space. So I don't know, the provenance of the Dark Enlightenment terminology, its connection to Nick Land and all of that, but there's something we could say about the figure as such of the Dark Enlightenment that I think is quite interesting and quite alluring. Because what's your ordinary enlightenment? Your ordinary enlightenment is everything is brought up to standards of scientific rationality. It's made patent in principle through the universalization of method, and truth becomes accessible and democratized through the, massification of scientific rationality, something like that. So if you add the adjective dark, then everything changes. Everything that comes along with the dark logos. You ever heard of Alexander Dugin's book, In Search of the Dark Logos? And the identification of the dark logos with Dionysus. The whole mystical tradition that sees a darkness that is even prior to the light, the darkness that is above all light. Think about Dionysius, the Areopagite, however you say that. So dark enlightenment is open to a mystical interpretation that I quite like. But I wouldn't want to play fast and loose with words. You got to read the people who coined it first, probably. So back to the article. Among other things, the Dark Enlightenment, or far-right neo-reaction, openly promotes dictatorships as superior to democracies and views nations like the United States as outdated software systems. Okay, quite a lot that you could say about that as well, right? You have the notion of dictatorship. Carl Schmitt's got a book on dictatorship. You have to be able to distinguish kinds of dictatorship. That's very important. Okay, you also have the question when a dictatorship, if ever, is justified. Something that is discussed in Leo Strauss's book on tyranny. Mandatory reading. Oh yeah, sorry, I haven't said it yet this stream, so please don't think this is a quote-unquote grift or nonstop self-promotion, but I do teach at millermanschool.com, and some of these authors I teach. Okay, Leo Strauss's On Tyranny, for example, I teach. You can read it without my help, obviously, but I also try to make it interesting in course format. So you should know that, millermanschool.com, take a look. But yeah, so dictatorship, you've got Carl Schmitt's book on it. You've got the discussion of when it's justified, when a republic has become corrupt enough for a Caesar to be justifiable and all that. Among other things, it openly promotes dictatorships as superior to democracies and views nations like the US as outdated software systems. Yarvin seeks to re-engineer governments by breaking them up into smaller entities called patchworks, which would be controlled by tech corporations. Now, a quote, quoting Yarvin here, the basic idea of patchwork is that as the crappy governments we inherited from history are smashed, they should be replaced by a global spiderweb of tens, even hundreds of thousands of sovereign and independent mini-countries, each governed by its own joint stock corporation without regard to the residents' opinions, he wrote in Patchwork, A Political System for the 21st Century. So guys, if this is at all intriguing to you, this would be an example where you can click over into Yarvin's essay, Patchwork, A Political System for the 21st Century, and read it. Because if you wrote it and you find it intriguing, then you should go read it. So Patchwork, A Political System for the 21st Century, here it is. And you see it's, maybe we'll even, not on this stream, but okay, this is to my mind, let me just say this. To my mind, what is most exciting, I'm off the article for a minute here, editorializing. What's most exciting about an administration where you have thinkers close to power, it's not always the case. Maybe you think it's always the case, but let's say thinkers that are, it's not always the case. Okay, let's just put it that way. Is that not only do you get to explore the amazing area where ideas overlap with their implementation, or where wisdom and tyranny meet, where philosophy and politics meet, okay, where this philosopher king phenomenon comes together, not only do you get to just kind of be in that exciting world, whether as an outsider or as an insider, whether you consider that your fortune or your misfortune, but you also get to go deeper. So anybody who thought that Leo Strauss was the mastermind of the neoconservatives, yeah, you could read books about which of his students worked in the administration of Bush and all of that. But for some people, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, I don't know. But for some people, it meant that they'd go read Strauss, okay? And that's the beauty. This means for some people here who'd never heard about him, they're going to go read Yarvin. And then that's it. That's it. When you're in Alice's Wonderland, it's over in a good way. When you get into the world of seriously thinking about politics and philosophy, you won the lottery, in my opinion. Each patchwork would be ruled by a quote-unquote realm, a corporation with absolute power. Citizens would be free to move I was going to say, the German word for realm is citizens would be free to move, but every other realm would also be ruled by corporate governments with chilling impunity. For example, Yarvin says the tech overlords of the San Francisco realm could arbitrarily decide to cut off its citizens' hands with no fear of legal consequences because they are a sovereign power beholden to no federal government or laws. Okay, here too, guys, I give you a quick little example, right? Maybe you think, oh, this is crazy. The tech overlords of San Francisco are going to cut off people's hands. That's ridiculous. And this guy's a stone's throw from the White House. Suddenly Trump is going to be cutting off people's hands left and right. But, there's also the thought here, well, what are the rules that limit what a sovereign power can do? Is it already the case that a sovereign power has in principle the right to do this? Is sovereignty beholden to anything else? Doesn't it lose its sovereignty when it is beholden to something else? What is sovereignty? What is power? What is right? What is natural right? What's civic right? What's natural law? So don't take any of these questions for granted just because a particular suggestion sounds kind of weirdish. Yeah, of course. You don't want tech overlords cutting off your hands. But what sort of punishments do you want, and what sort of power is sovereign power? That's also Carl Schmitt, if you talk about dictatorship, right? Dictatorship, there's two forms of dictatorship, roughly speaking. One form is the dictatorship that abolishes the legal structure. Another form is dictatorship that's a temporary salvation of the legal structure when the law itself is under threat. Okay, these are well-worn themes in Carl Schmitt's thought, but if you're not familiar with them, then you have to familiarize yourselves with them. The realm having sovereign power can compel the resident to comply with all promises. Guys, you realize you live in a quote-unquote realm now that has sovereign power. I live in Canada. In Montreal during COVID, we had a curfew at 8 p.m. Curfew. You can't go outside. You were allowed to walk your dog, so some people dressed their significant others up like an animal, put them on a leash, and went outside after 8 p.m. That didn't go over well with the authorities. The realm having sovereign power can compel the resident to comply with all promises. Since San Francisco is not an Islamic state, it does not ask its residents to agree that their hand will be cut off if they steal. But it could. And San Francisco likewise can promise not to cut off its residents' hands until it's blue in the face, but since it's a sovereign state, no one can enforce this promise against it. Guys, that is a problem inherent in the issue of sovereignty as such. So you might take it up with, do you want to have a political order in which there's no sovereign? By the way, I haven't checked the news lately. Does anybody know where Joe Biden is? Is the United States a regime with no sovereign at the moment? So something else I want to tell you just about this passage, because I like to read these articles with you, but I also like to connect it to things that are, deeper for those of you who care about that. So take this paragraph, okay? The realm having sovereign power can compel residents to comply with all promises. San Francisco is not an Islamic state, so it's not going to ask you to cut off your hand. It's not going to, make you agree to cut off your hand if you steal. That won't be part of the social contract, but it could. So what I want to focus on is the but it could. I've been working on a class. I mention this book every live stream because you got to read this book if you care about these topics. The Laws of Plato. You know Plato's Apology. That's good. You know Plato's Republic. That's great. You should know all of Plato, the Symposium and everything. But this book, make sure you know it. Make sure you read it. Make sure you've heard of it. Okay? I teach it. You don't have to take my course on it, but Plato's Laws. Why do I mention it? Because just because the sovereign can, in principle, do something, like you can say, right? You can say to yourself, I, as the sovereign power, can, in principle, make a law that ... right? You must hop everywhere on your left foot, or I'm going to make you, whatever, say the alphabet backwards. You could, in principle, say sovereignty has the right to declare any law that it wants to. But in fact, what you learn in Plato's Laws is that there's always unwritten customs, the nature of the people and the place. And you can't, the sovereign can't swim upstream. He can't make down be up in all cases. So just the passage of the laws that I was lecturing on earlier today, had to do with the regulation of erotic relationships, okay, sexual relationships. Amazing passages in the laws. And what Plato says, very roughly, okay, is that from the point of view of the legislator, it would be best if you had like perfect regulation of erotic relationships so that, everybody only desired his own wife. He didn't desire somebody else's wife. God forbid somebody else's children, right? Unregulated erotic desire is the cause of many difficulties in a political community. But just because you're a sovereign doesn't mean you can say, let it be so, and it's so. In fact, in certain circumstances, you couldn't even go against the dominant common opinion if you're a sovereign. Somehow your sovereignty would lose all of its legitimacy and all of its power. Try becoming a sovereign and in one stroke outdoing the whole dominant woke ideology. Yeah, maybe that'll fly. Maybe it won't. But there are limitations to what sovereignty can accomplish when you are exercising acts of sovereignty against a background of well-established practice, custom, common opinion, habit, and second nature. That's what a serious analysis of this issue would look like. Well, I'm still enjoying this article, okay? We read these articles because they give us an entry point. So now we're back to Curtis Yarvin. So let me just remind you those of you who have just joined in, okay, I got to tell you what we're doing. So we're reading this article called Where J.D. Vance Gets His Weird, Terrifying Techno-Authoritarian Ideas. Dark Realm. You see that? Dark Realm. Published by Jill Duran, July 22nd. That's today, is it not? And this is in newrepublic.com. And we're in the part of the article that is discussing Yarvin's ideas about patchwork, a political system for the 21st century. Each patchwork would be ruled by a realm. Realms are sovereign, and in principle, they can decide to cut off your hands. All right, that's where we are in the article. In Friscorp, as Yarvin calls the San Francisco realm, an all-seeing Orwellian surveillance system would enforce public safety. All residents, even temporary visitors, carry an ID card with RFID response. All are genotyped and iris scanned. Public places and transportation systems track everyone. Security cameras are ubiquitous. Every car knows where it is and who is sitting in it and tells the authorities both. Vance has not advocated for realms yet, but some of his most extreme ideas echo Yarvin, according to the article. They're both fond of political purges, for instance. Now I'm sitting here debating, should I tell you that political purges are part of political Platonism? Or is that going to get Plato into trouble? In the New Republic, which is kind of funny. The New Republic. They're both fond of political purges, for instance. In a 2021 podcast interview, I'm sure that this is the one with Jack Murphy Live, even without looking, Vance was asked how to get liberals out of government institutions. Denazification, de-Baathification, he replied. I tend to think that we should seize the institutions of the left and turn them against the left. We need a de-Baathification program, a de-Wokeification program. I wonder what you guys think about that. If you're following the social media stuff, then you know that Elon Musk talked to Jordan Peterson today, and that Elon Musk, apparently, I did not listen to the interview, okay, just a small part of it, but apparently Elon Musk gave a touching story there about the transitioning of his son. And he feels like his son was killed, taken from him and killed. And that now he's on a personal mission, main quest, to destroy the woke mind virus. Okay, de-Wokeification. He predicted, we're talking about J.D. Vance, he predicted Trump would run again and win, then offered some advice in his 2021 interview. Okay, I interjected my comments, but just to remind you, so in this 2021 podcast interview, Vance predicted Trump would run again and win, then offered some advice. I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. He added that Trump should defy any court orders that tried to halt this partisan purge of the civil service. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you, just like I did in my other live stream on J.D. Vance and the right, that this podcast, Jack Murphy Live, it also had Yarvin on it, which you might find interesting. Yarvin talking to a great scholar named Michael Anton. You may not know who Michael Anton is. I'll leave you that as a separate rabbit hole. So you can actually find on the same podcast program where Vance made these comments, Yarvin was also interviewed. And, that's just, again, those of you who want to go there, do it. Yarvin calls this plan RAGE, retire all government employees. It's captured perfectly in Project 2025, which I think we're going to have to do a separate live stream on, the Heritage Foundation's blueprint for a second Trump administration, which calls for firing an estimated 500,000 federal employees and dismantling entire agencies. If Trump wins, Vance may well be in charge of executing the plan. So guys, independently of the question whether there's any merit to this, would you support a large-scale de-wokification program? And does that excite you about Vance and his VP position? Okay, hold on. Are we stalling a little bit? Hope not. Vance did not get this extremist ideology from his Appalachian upbringing or, needless to say, Yale Law. It was incubated in America's tech capital, San Francisco, where he forged crucial ties with Thiel, Yarvin, and, new name in this article, David Sachs, the longtime Thiel associate and pro-Putin. Okay, ding, ding, ding. That's supposed to make you think all kinds of associations. Pro-Putin crusader who recently hosted a Trump fundraiser at his mansion in Pacific Heights. And if Vance ends up in the White House, it will be with $45 million in monthly campaign contributions from Musk, who already made a $44 billion in-kind contribution by gutting San Francisco-based Twitter. Yay, I think we're all happy about that. And transforming it into a right-wing misinformation weapon. Okay, Twitter became much better, much more fun, much freer, and a great source of information. I mean, after all, where did Joe Biden allegedly himself let the world know that he was resigning from his post and not just being coerced into stepping down? Nowhere else but on Twitter. In a fateful twist, San Francisco also launched the political career of Kamala Harris, who's set to inherit the task of saving democracy from tech authoritarianism. Okay, make sure you tune in every week for Kamala Harris's brave superwoman fight to save American democracy from tech authoritarianism. So that was the article by Jill Duran, San Francisco journalist who previously served as editorial page editor of the Sacramento Bee and San Francisco Examiner. Credit where it's due all the time. Okay, so you can follow Jill Duran if you enjoyed that piece, which was fun to read, in my opinion. Hopefully gave us something to think about, which is really the most that you could ask for. I love that it's marked Dark Realm. I think that's pretty hilarious. Came out today. All right, so we are, what's the word? A la mode or whatever. You know, we're cutting edge. We're here on the Daily News. So J.D. Vance gets his weird, terrifying techno-authoritarian ideas from Curtis Yarvin, from Peter Thiel, okay, from pro-Putin David Sachs, from Elon Musk. And they are all on one side. And on the other side, you have Kamala Harris, obviously fighting for American democracy because, as you know, she's got huge democratic legitimacy, since clearly she won a huge portion of the Democratic, presidential contest, right? I mean, I think she got, what was it? Can somebody remind me? The huge Democratic mandate, for sure. Someone's going to have to remind me of the exact numbers that Kamala Harris got. And it's obviously been extremely democratic how she's, become the front runner now that Biden has, with no questions asked, stepped aside for the good of democracy. So everything is very democratic with Biden and Harris. Like it's the very picture of democracy. But on the other hand, you have the dark realm of tech authoritarianism. So you really just have to ask yourselves where you stand. Well, that was that article. Okay, and now we got another one. So let me see what it is. This one is called, and come on, I am sure that I had this one pulled up. Okay, give me a second. Oh no, yeah, excuse me, sorry. This one, Silicon Valley's safe space. This was linked in the one we were just reading. It's behind a paywall. I don't have it teed up. We're not going to do it. This profit strategies for new corporate overlords is Mencius Moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin, 2008. We saw that referred to in the piece we were reading when we had that idea of the patchwork political system for the 21st century. We set that aside. We moved to the second article that I had teed up for you, which is this. Not behind a paywall, right? Okay, good. Yeah, the whole thing is not behind a paywall. J.D. Vance and the Tech Trad Alliance, July 19, 2024. Okay, give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to take a breath here, refill my water, give you a chance to get everything from the last article out of your system before we launch into this one. I mean, really dark, disturbing thoughts in the last one. You might be terrified now for your coming tech authoritarian overlords, and they might stick you into a virtual reality machine, and that's like nearly genocide, as we saw according to Curtis Yarvin. And All kinds of crazy stuff going on in the dark realm. So, brace yourselves, please, for this next article on JD Vance and the Tech Trad Alliance. And I'm going to ask my kids to refill my water. Okay, if you don't have kids, get kids. They make you coffee in the morning. It's great, great fun. Would you please get me some water? All right. Here we go. JD Vance and the Tech Trad Alliance. Guys, this is where the future is headed. For better or worse. What does Ross Dutat have to say? Let's take a look. Just over 7 months ago, the talented pseudonymous writer Trace Woodgrains wrote an essay announcing the Republican Party's doom. Not the doom of electoral irrelevance, since the GOP clearly isn't going anywhere, but the doom of being unable to find enough talented people to actually carry out its agenda, shape the culture, or really govern the United States. Citing data on highly educated America's leftward swing and his experience as a gay centrist Biden voter who feels like one of the most right-leaning students at his law school, Woodgrains argued that Trump-era conservatism suffers from a fatal human capital problem, an inability to generate elite support on any meaningful scale. Conservative populism, he suggested, is a potent mass movement with an enduring vacuum at the top. This week, with the nomination of JD Vance as Donald Trump's running mate, and the recent surge of support for Trump's campaign from Silicon Valley, Woodgrains reconsidered the durability of his diagnosis. Okay, hold on. I don't know whether we're going to read these, but I do want to kind of pull them up and just see what the references are to there. So Woodgrains reconsidered the durability of his diagnosis. The Vance pick, he wrote, suggests that the GOP is looking to make an appeal to anti-woke Silicon Valley or finance types to fill the void left by the Republican Party's competency crisis, with Vance as an exemplar of what a right-leaning counter-elite might look like. And the response from tech money especially suggests that it might be working, since it's not just Peter Thiel backing Trump this time around. Guys, you got to think back to when it was just Peter Thiel. It's Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen and many more. Okay, and I add parenthetically, that's a big deal. All right, you might like it. You might hate it. You might think it's tech authoritarianism or not, but it's hugely significant if you're trying to understand Trump 2.0, Trump 2024, okay? 47 as opposed to 45. So Thiel, Musk, Andreessen, and many more. Why? Because nature abhors a vacuum. Republicans offer a sort of Faustian bargain to ambitious, anti-woke, secular sorts. Make your peace with the evangelicals. Pander to social conservatism and gain sway in a coalition crying out for policy competence. More than a few people will take that bargain. People are drawn to power voids. I like this argument, he says, the author of this piece, because it supplies a structural context to a sudden shift that a lot of observers are scrambling to explain. See, among others, Reed, Albergotti, and Noah Smith running through a list of policy issues, cultural changes, and yes, vibe shifts that help explain why the Trumpian GOP suddenly has more support in Silicon Valley than in 2020 or 2016. All these indicators are helpful to understanding the emergent tech right. Now, I assume that leads to the article by Hanania that we read. Nope, it leads to this other article, Why the Tech Right Loves Trump. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a never-ending stream because I think we're going to read that too, but let's go back here. Are we good? Where are we? Hold on a second. Hold on, let me just get us back to the article. Thanks for your patience. All these indicators are helpful to understanding the emergent tech right. But if you look at the shift through the lens suggested by Woodgrains' analysis, what you see is a somewhat predictable rebalancing, a system trying to move closer to an equilibrium. A situation where one electoral coalition has plenty of political influence, but remarkably limited elite representation might just be inherently unstable. If a coalition can win elections and hold power, even if it seems culturally disreputable, eventually some elites will find reasons to support it and try to turn its power to their ends. And both liberals who hoped for the permanent marginalization of Trumpism and right-wingers who feared the permanent dominance of a culturally liberal quote-unquote cathedral, by the way, that's Curtis Yarvin's term, possibly overestimated how long the American elite could remain unified without some modest crack-up, some realignment within the ruling class. But, the article continues, I would add two important qualifiers to Woodgrain's description of an emergent tech right that decides it needs to hold its nose and pander to social conservatism to share power in the GOP. The first is that, to some degree, Trump smoothed the rightward path for the tech barons by remaking the Republican Party along somewhat more post-Christian, pagan-light, barstool conservative lines. Here, some of the distinctive features of this week's Republican convention, from the sidelining of pro-lifers in the platform writing process to the speech by a former stripper and OnlyFans performer, are themselves helpful in explaining why it feels culturally easier for tech money to support the Republican Party. It's still a socially conservative party. If Musk moves two of his company's headquarters to Texas, he'll be moving them to a state that heavily restricts abortion. But it's not the GOP of Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson, or for that matter, George W. Bush. Okay, so the first reason that tech people are able to support Trump is because somehow the party has become, quote, post-Christian, pagan-light, barstool conservative, unquote, in some capacity, to some extent. But second, there's also some congruence between the tech right and what I, the author of the article, Ross Douthat, called the neo-traditionalist version of religious conservatism. For some, not all tech people, and some, not all religious conservatives, a political alliance isn't just a matter of hold your nose convenience. There's also a philosophical convergence. Guys, that's what we are most interested in, okay? The convenient bedfellows is one thing. The philosophical convergence is the more interesting thing. A set of premises held in common about the nature of the universe and the condition of America today. All right, so now we are transitioning in this article towards that, okay? The philosophical convergence between tech people and religious conservatives. I wonder, do you see that in yourself? Do you find that? Do you see these tendencies as opposed? I'll give you the classic example of, as it were, a traditionalist who does not support these tech players. As a rule, that's Alexander Dugin, okay, who sees the potentials in technological development in terms of a trajectory towards transhumanism, something that he considers through and through satanic and destructive of everything good and glorious about man and God. Okay, and yet there are people who can find a philosophical convergence between their quote-unquote religious conservatism and their positive interpretation of tech, the tech world, tech potentials, and all of that. One is a shared faith in cosmic order. The article continues, a belief that the world is still a puzzle waiting for solutions, not just a random jumble or a permanent mystery. That there's underlying order everywhere and great secrets hidden from us that might yet be unlocked or revealed. Guys, as I read this, I see references to Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, which I think if you haven't read, you should read. Or you should read it together with Peter Thiel's Straussian moment, okay? Get the Straussian dimensions of Thiel's book on entrepreneurship. Here, parenthetically, the author continues, it's telling that the Silicon Valley types pulled rightward seem to be mostly venture capital types or enthusiasts for edge products like crypto and AI, the would-be secret finders, the mystics of capitalism. Okay, I might as well say a word about this. First of all, good to be with you, as always. Thank you for spending your time here. Do you see what he's suggesting? There is something quasi-religious, mystical, spiritual, magical, initiatory, and inspirational about the act of the founder. Now, in political philosophy, that's true when you talk about the founder of regimes. Moses, Romulus, Lycurgus, okay, the great founder of political order. But the parallel in business is the founder of a startup, the founder of a company, the founder of a new sector, a great inventor. Read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 and you'll see examples. I mean, I discuss them in writings, in my interview with Russians with Attitude, a great podcast. We actually did most of our talk, not about Russia, but on this question about the sort of mystical dimensions of the tech entrepreneurs. I have separate curriculum about it at visionxform.com, but you just have to think. The entrepreneur is kind of like a mystic. That sounds weird and sacrilegious, and it is. Okay, I'm over-exaggerating it, but there's something about being the discoverer of hidden secrets, which you have to be a successful entrepreneur in some capacity, I think. Read 0 to 1, it's there. And there are other examples of it, okay? The would-be secret finders, the mystics of capitalism. So to repeat, what brings together the tech and religious elements philosophically? Shared faith in cosmic order, a belief that the world is a puzzle waiting for solutions. I mean, maybe you see that symbolically in the conversation today between Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk. Now, there are other reasons why the two might be talking to one another, but somehow Jordan Peterson, the seeker of cosmic meaning and mysteries, Elon Musk, in his own way, doing the same thing. Okay, I mentioned in my live stream, last one on JD Vance and the Right, an author. I just want you to know about this author. Yes, I teach him in my school. No, that's not the only reason I'm mentioning him. Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik wrote a book called The Lonely Man of Faith, which explains how these two dimensions of the human soul, that part which seeks the still silent voice, and the acts of faith that respond to it, and the communities of faith that are constructed around it, and that part of us that wants to find secrets out in the universe through exploration, like making humanity a multiplanetary species. These are two deep roots of the human soul. In Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik's book, The Lonely Man of Faith, he makes an argument that the two creation stories in Genesis, which he calls Adam A and Adam B, they represent these two roots. And he argues that in modernity, the tech impulse has come to dominate and destroy sort of our receptivity to the still small voice. That's a problem. There are other great authors that make that point in their own way. And he says these two things can't be reconciled, but they're two fundamental human tendencies. Amazing and important book, and amazing and important thought that I think helps us to understand what the author here is discussing, the philosophical convergence of the religious right and the tech right. Back to the article, another element of the philosophical convergence is that human beings have some important cosmic destiny, that we aren't just doomed to blink out in some entirely meaningless apocalypse, that our image of God's side is essential to the story of the world. Another, third point of overlap, is that Western civilization has fallen into a slough of despond, of despondency, or despair, basically that Kali Yuga kind of stuff. And that to escape, we need to reject woke progressivism, which is setting itself up as a post-Christian church of late modern despair. Now, I just want to see, what is this article referring to? Oh, slough. Okay, this is a technical phrase, I guess, that I'm not familiar with. The slough of despond is a fictional deep bog in John Bunyan's allegory, The Pilgrim's Pilgrim's Progress. Okay, so anyway, you get it, right? We're in the pits of hell. Western civilization has fallen. The Great Awakening has thrown everything into despair, and we need to rise up and fight like hell. Yet another link is that there's some connection between cultural and intellectual fertility and literal fertility, between dynamism and traditionalism, and that reversing the collapse of birth rates is one of the greatest tasks of the 21st century. I want to say here in passing, for the sort of more well-versed in traditionalism among you, if I am not mistaken, it's been a while since I taught Julius Evola. In particular, that passage of his that comes to mind concerning birth projects, should increasing births be a government priority? I remember the traditionalist Evola saying, no, it's kind of wrong to treat the sacred realm of childbirth with the vulgar measure of pure quantity. There's something in the traditionalist that opposes the reign of quantity, like Guénon says, the reign of quantity and the sign of the times. Somehow modernity is characterized by throwing the oppressive web of quantification over everything, destroying its qualitative aspect. Different ways to think about it, but I just remembered here that it's funny because the author is saying that one of the overlapping areas between the tech and the trad groups is their concern with fertility, and then it just made me remember Evola's argument against government natalist projects. But anyway, back to the article. A convergence between religious impulses and technological ambitions, or between trad bros and tech bros, if you prefer, is not a novel thing in American history. Just ask the great 19th century Protestant industrialists. Nor is it unknown in the history of modern conservatism. The Reaganism of the 1970s and 80s was, in its own way, an alliance of Californian dynamists and evangelical Christians. Such an alliance might seem more unnatural now than it was back then. Silicon Valley is more fundamentally post-Christian than was, say, the culture of the Cold War aerospace industry. And some of the projects the tech right would likely embrace, radical genetic engineering, the quest for the AI God, create more fundamental conflict with traditional religious belief, sharpening the tension between America's Christian and Faustian impulses. I want to pause the article here for a minute and just think, right? We haven't read this article before. It's raising some points. We got to stop and think. So the conversation between Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson, again, we take that as symbolic of something. Both of them in some way, Christian and not Christian. Wouldn't you say so? I think Elon Musk said in this interview from clips, so I don't know for sure, that he said, even though he's not a Christian, he thinks that Jesus's teachings were full of wisdom and are good and worth following. So on one hand, and I believe that Jordan Peterson, if I'm not mistaken, great degree of sympathy towards Christianity, but from the point of view of kind of, how could you put it, ordinary Christians, he wavers over basic Christian doctrine, wanting to mythologize it and symbolize it more than, is comfortable in those circles. So I'm just trying to think here. Post-Christian in a way, but yet retaining important traces of Christianity, important elements of Christian morality, important references to the Christian texts, and probably more fundamentally Christian than not. I wonder what you think about that. It's a big question. I was working with one student of mine on a book that I think argued, post-Christianity is the natural tendency of Christianity itself. But we won't go into all of that now. I was just trying to think through this, okay? Silicon Valley is fundamentally post-Christian, more so than the Cold War era aerospace industry. Fine, then you have this quest for the AI God. You guys know I did a video on Jordan Peterson who was arguing that, not to keep mentioning him, but that large language models can clarify our concept of God. I thought that was very not true. So yeah, there's a problem here. Okay, a tension between America's Christian and Faustian impulses. Under such conditions, and by the way, maybe you see that too with, on one hand, the followers of Bronze Age pervert and the Bronze Age mindset, the Baptists on the right, the Nietzscheans on the right, and the Christians or the religious fellows on the right. And does that also represent the kind of tension between America's Christian and Faustian impulses? Under such conditions, the modest spiritual stirrings in Silicon Valley could flower into a fully pagan or transhumanist religious culture, and the tech trad congruence could dissolve. So I want to ask you guys now, we're not done the article. I think we're probably getting close to it, but we're not done. Do you think that this tech trad congruence, number one, is a thing? Okay, we have some evidence for the fact that it is, I would say, J.D. Vance being the kind of lightning rod for that. So is it a thing? Is it a good thing? And is it something that is viable, or is it likely to dissolve because of the tension between the Christian and the Faustian impulses? And these things are ultimately going to have to move in separate directions. Like either the tech becomes anti-trad or the trad becomes anti-tech, but you can't have a square circle no matter how much you want to please the squares and the circles. Very, very briefly, okay, I see a comment, Dom Sawyer. To be honest, I'm not seeing the connection between trad and the tech right the author's trying to make here. Well, let's just quickly review, okay, very quickly. So the first one that we had is the fertility issue. So trad people and tech people, both interested in literal fertility, cultural fertility, intellectual fertility, and their links to one another. Also kind of old topic, because if you think about Plato's cave allegory in the Republic, you'll see there's a link between the notion of fertility. The sun afterwards empowers not just the possibility of intellectual apprehension, but also it is, as it were, a source of life. So that was the one point, the overlap of these different kinds of fertility and the concern of fertility. The other one was that tech bros and trad bros are both concerned with the great awakening and the destruction of Western civilization. By the way, I say tech bro and trad bro just following the quick offhand terminology of this article, but there are women, okay? There are women, trad women, tech women, We're just following the, as I say, quick, easy terminology of the article. Another one is this thought that tech and trad bros both think human beings have an important cosmic destiny and a faith in a cosmic order, okay? The belief that a world is a puzzle waiting for solutions. So those are some of the arguments. Again, you may not agree with them. You may think they are superficial or something, but that's what they are. I want to do a quick review. Back to the article. The convergence might become more profound. So it might dissolve, but it might become more profound if the ranks of the neo-trads increase and traditional religious belief makes a comeback. I'm working on it, he writes parenthetically, within the American educated classes. So should we pull that up, just see what that's all about? What is it that he's working on? So you've got this article, Tyler Cowen, reviewed July 8th, 2024. I don't know whether you can see this on screen or not. I believe you can, right? Why everyone should be religious. Ross Dutat, Tyler Cowen. All right, why everyone should be religious. So apparently he sees that as part of his effort to make this happen. Okay, the convergence might become more profound if the ranks of the neo-trads increase and the traditional religious belief makes a comeback within American educated classes. Yeah, by the way, can I put that on screen? Oh, it's too much text on screen. You won't see it. The selection of J.D. Vance is the dawn of a golden era for Millerman viewers. I appreciate that comment. That's how I feel, actually, to tell you the truth. I'm so glad we get a chance to spend time together discussing these topics. And I told you that my circles were energized by the pick, and I myself was energized by it for that very reason, okay? Back to the article. This is where Vance, J.D. Vance, looms as a potentially significant figure. As a Catholic convert with a background in venture capital, a religious believer whom the Silicon Valley right plainly regards as an ally and a friend, he's personally a bridge between a populist religious conservatism and a Muskian tech right. The immediate policy question for a second Trump term is how the tech right's libertarian impulses can mesh with Trumpian populism and Vance's desire to become a tribune of the common man. Now, those of you who were here for the earlier article, you saw that the tech right is not all libertarian. In fact, there's a real worry that it's authoritarian, if not dictatorial, tyrannical, and practically, its own little caliphate that's going to chop your hands off. That was the other article, right? How the tech right's libertarian impulses can mesh with Trumpian populism and Vance's desire to be a tribune of the common man. But the deeper question for the right is more philosophical. Are the tech bros and trads just allies of convenience? Or is Vance the forerunner of a religious elite waiting to be reborn? Okay, so great article for us to read and discuss, setting out the fundamental problem of the new Trump administration, an exciting problem, a good problem to have. You don't want to have the problem that you have, that the Democrats have. You don't want to have that problem. I haven't checked the news in the last few hours, okay? Are there signs of life from Biden? This is a good problem to have, that you have intelligent people in tech, intelligent people who have traditionalist urges and inclinations and all of that, alliance, and they're forming an alliance. That's not bad. When I used to have something go wrong, my mom would say, let that be the worst of your problems, okay? This is not a bad problem to have. The Tech Trad Alliance, and J.D. Vance is the one. He's the chosen one, okay, to be the great unifier who embodies in himself this very problem of the Tech Trad Alliance. So anyways, I enjoyed that article. Okay, guys, we've got more. My kids brought me a cup of coffee. I'm feeling like it's kind of late to be drinking coffee, but then again, I'm having so much fun. So hold on a second. We have more. So let me do something. First of all, I was looking, the reason I started this stream a few minutes late, because I saw there was some article by Tyler Cowen that I felt would be appropriate for us to read, and I couldn't find it. And lo and behold, here it is, The Great Vibe Shift of 2024. So I want to pull it up. I'm not promising you that we're going to read it. We've got a lot of stuff up on screen now. Let's just see. Let me close a couple of things. I'm afraid that I might start stalling. Okay, I'm going to close what we already read. Hey, this is fun. All right, hold on. Let's give you guys a chance. I can't go through all these comments, okay, but I always like to throw you up on screen here. So Some comments about Yarvin's utopia doesn't sound significantly different from Klaus Schwab's. Technies have no useful contribution to make. Well, that would be one criticism, that all, as technological thinkers, all technological thinkers form a class. They have a class interest. They see the world in the same way, and they should be all in on one or another side of the equation. They're equally bad, or whatever you want to think. But then again, how do you explain the fact that so many of them are defecting to Trump? Now, you might just think, well, it's easy to explain. Trump is going to win. That's easy. You want to be on the side of the winners or the losers? Where can you be more influential? Biden has made Musk's life quite difficult, hasn't he? Whereas Trump gets on stage and says we got to protect people like Musk. But I don't think it goes without saying that everybody in tech is aligned as to questions of world order and justice, injustice, right, wrong, good, bad, power, who should get what, how systems should operate. There are other prominent tech people who don't support Trump. I think Reid Hoffman is often mentioned as somebody who, for his reasons, is all in on the Democrats still. Okay, there's some question about Orrin McIntyre. Have I considered a conversation with him or review his book? So I haven't read Orrin McIntyre's book, The Total State. You could look it up. Orrin McIntyre, guys, if you don't know, has a show on Blaze Media, which you should definitely take a look at. I did 5 interviews with Orrin McIntyre. I was a guest on his program to discuss Dugin's book, The Fourth Political Theory. So it is true that I have talked to Orrin McIntyre before. I haven't seen his book. I haven't read his book, okay, but you should definitely take a look at that. Some comments on Peterson, who I'd mentioned. He's a Jungian and a hesitant Christian. I don't know that throwing the two identities together is very helpful. Okay, some other comments here. Again, probably my favorite, most accurate selection of J.D. Vance is the dawn of a golden era. For Millerman viewers, I appreciate that. Kessler, Baptist means a follower of BAP, B-A-P, Bronze Age Pervert, author of Bronze Age Mindset, and supposedly the same figure as the one who wrote this book back here, right there, called Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy, which I have done a video review of, okay? So yeah, all right, good comments. I appreciate you guys being here. Let's go through a couple more articles. We've got nowhere to go right this minute, do we? Let's see. Boy, there's so much to cover. Should we? I don't know. A quick word in the chat. Do you guys want to do? Hey, someone's posting under my name. Leo, please do not comment on the video under my name. Appreciate that though. Good for laughs. So we have a bunch of articles that came up as we were reading those. Why the tech right loves Trump. The change in vibes. Why did they happen? What's this here? Musk turbocharges Silicon Valley. Support for Trump. And J.D. Vance in the GOP's bid to beat its human capital problem. Okay, that was referred to. We'll skip that. Guys, I was also going to read this. Lukács diagnosed the irrationalism at the heart of right-wing thought. And we'll save that for another day. Let's do at least this one, okay? Are we witnessing, so what is this? July 17th, why the tech right loves Trump. Unheard, H-E-R-D, Mary Harrington. That's what the article that we're going to read. Are we witnessing, she asks, the end of tech's domination by California and the left? Elon Musk announced yesterday that he's moving the SpaceX and X headquarters from the Golden State to Texas. So again, that was a couple of days ago now. At almost the same moment, investors Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz announced on their podcast that they're endorsing Donald Trump, citing Trumpian policies on cutting-edge tech that are far more aligned with their aspirations for America's future. Guys, you should know that Mark Andreessen is a tech optimist. I've covered his, I think it's called Tech Optimist Manifesto on this channel. You can pull that up and read it. Quick and easy read, worth considering. This crystallizes a trend that's been visible for some time and which was explored in depth earlier this year by the always prescient N.S. Lyons, L-Y-N-O-S. I predicted in April that this progressive right would emerge victorious among the assorted agendas currently wrestling for control of the conservative movement. And lo and behold, America's most cutting-edge technologists are coalescing behind Trump, providing heavyweight endorsements and new funding sources that will, they hope, translate into more friendly relations with the White House after November. Let me pause here for a minute. Guys, you got to think, who was empowered by the Trump win in 2016? Loosely speaking, in our circles. Okay, in our circles. Who was empowered in 2016 when Trump won? deplorables, okay, yeah, deplorables, I would say the young online dissident right to some extent for a while. Okay, then Trump, he had some problems with the people that he had around him. I think you know some of that story. Okay, but the people who were empowered in 2016 were, again, in the intellectual circles, the online dissident right. Okay, the alt-right had a certain sort of moment. BAP had a certain sort of moment. Okay, Nietzscheans had a certain sort of moment. This full-blown tech right support for Trump is new and intriguing. I already said that, but I want to remind you about it. Okay, it's not all the same. Musk, of course, has been a bête noire for the Biden administration for some time, having prized a major consensus formation tool from progressive fingers in the name of free speech. Right, that's right. Progressives didn't like that Musk bought Twitter, obviously, because they were able to control what people think and what people say online through their control of that outlet, and he reversed that, thankfully. So they didn't like that, and he's been subjected to lawsuits from all quarters. When Musk announced the Tesla HQ move, he declared that the final straw was new state rules on how and when schools must disclose pupils' gender wishes to parents, which included a ban on schools requiring disclosure. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, apparently Musk hits close to home because apparently he has some son who has transitioned and is now lost to him or something like that. And perhaps that was the final straw, but Musk also mentioned the many other laws that preceded it attacking both families and companies. At least some of what he's referencing here is likely to be the increasingly adversarial relation between Biden's Democrats and the tech sector, which has included a slew of policies aimed at regulating and constraining cutting-edge technologies such as crypto, AI, and biotech. If social media was broadly left liberal in sensibility, with the biggest firms becoming progressive political actors in their own right, these newer fields of innovation are often fiercely resistant to such collectivist moral constraints. Crypto, for example, is strongly libertarian. And guys, I want to tell you, the first person who ever paid me in my school, millermanschool.com, in Bitcoin was a libertarian. Okay, so that was an interesting overlap, too, of forces. Crypto is strongly libertarian. The whole point is to cut the state out of currency creation. As for AI, in order to function usefully, its pattern recognition capabilities must accurately reflect reality. I assume you all remember, this is me now talking, not the article, when Google's AI, you'd tell it anything and it would give you like the most woke progressive version of it. It was hilarious. It was comical. It was disgusting and disturbing. And I think they had to shut it down after like 24 hours. So for innovators in the field, AI bias obligations seeking to constrain, say, an AI's ability to surface or express politically incorrect patterns looks less like progress in protecting vulnerable people than obstacles to progress in tech development in the national interest. If you're working on AI technologies and you're not doing them in order to control populations with social engineering so that they're like lie machines, but rather you want them to be truth machines. Separate question. We've discussed on this channel whether AI can be a truth machine. What does it mean to be a truth machine? What is truth and what is a machine? But still, right? A lie machine versus a truth machine, close enough for our purposes to understand. Well, the people working on these technologies, they want them to have some fidelity to reality. Yeah, okay, then you have the state wants it to lie for social control. But that's showing you why there's kind of a tension, right? Some of the people in AI, they don't want this technology to get into the hands of Democrats who are going to make it lie and tell you that everything diverse is good, if it isn't. This faction is now firmly behind Trump. Andreessen and Horowitz are evidently on friendly dining terms with the former president. And as they put it, only the orange man is promising to champion innovation, in sharp contrast to the Biden administration's brutal assault on the nascent crypto industry. As Andreessen sees it, under a democratic government, the default path for AI would be a reign of terror and regulation comparable to the one they complain of in crypto, which would mean the industry is in profound trouble. Guys, you should take a look at Mark Andreessen. Not that I know everything he's ever said or put out, but in one of the clips that I saw circulating recently, I believe he said he was talking to regulators, democratic regulators, about AI, and something like they said, look, if we considered that the math was a national security threat, we would ban the math. Like, they said we did it in the Manhattan Project, certain science becomes off limits. And if we deemed that the math behind AI was a public security threat, we would ban the math. And I guess, for a person like Andreessen, or for a person like Elon Musk, or for a person who loves the truth and wants truth understood in a certain sort of way here. Okay, we could go on a separate hours-long tangent about Heidegger's interpretation of truth, but I'm talking here like 2 + 2 = 4 kind of truth. You don't want the government to ban 2 + 2 = 4. Something about that just gives you the ick factor, doesn't it? So that's what we're talking about here. As Andreessen sees it, under a democratic government, the default path for AI would be a reign of terror and regulation comparable to the one they complain of in crypto, which would mean the industry is in profound trouble. They contrast this approvingly with Trump's proposal to build the greatest economy in history, promising to repeal Democrats' regulatory constraints on AI, eliminate radical left-wing ideology, and promote AI development rooted in free speech and human flourishing. In their view, AI will be transformative, including in warfare, and could deliver the biggest technological boom of all time, provided it's free to play out. And that, guys, I believe is quoting from Andreessen's Tech Manifesto, Optimist Manifesto, or something like that. Tech Optimist Manifesto. When we put these sentiments together with the nomination of the tech titan's favorite J.D. Vance as the Republican VP, the elite counterpart to Trump's mass coalition comes into focus. This matters, for as historian Peter Turchin argues, the silent majority will have very little effect unless a mass movement gains elite support. This is especially true given that the Republican masses have for some time now coded increasingly lower status. Vance himself reportedly described them in 2016 as, whether they liked it or not, the party of lower income, lower education white people, right? People might think like, if you're upper class, you vote for the Democrats. If you're white trash, you vote for Trump. Okay, this is not my opinion, okay? I'm saying this is the opinion that, but now you have tech millionaires and billionaires and VCs and inventors and the greatest minds in the world, scientifically speaking, the greatest scientific minds in the world. Okay, you always have to remember that for a person like me, right? Nobody reaches the level of Plato and Heidegger, and talking about tech and math is one thing, talking about philosophy is something different. But still, let's call Musk, a pretty significant figure in innovation, science, and technology in the world today. Okay, so it's different, right? It's different. The status, the voting for Trump and supporting the Republicans and being on team Trump-Vance, it's different now, right? That's not coded low status. The question has therefore been, which subsets of the elite would break Republican? In tech, this is now clear. Where Obama's allies in the industry were social media platform moguls, Trump's are crypto, AI, and biotech investors eager to accelerate America into a new golden age of innovation. Time will tell how aligned their aspirations are with those of the broader American public, but one thing seems increasingly clear. They have the bandaged ear of a man who may be about to become president again. So that was Mary Harrington on why the tech right loves Trump. Okay, nice picture of Elon Musk. Has anybody ever called him Elon Mars? Coin it if you want to, okay? Elon Musk, Occupy Mars. The end of tech's domination by California and the left. Okay, once again, we're in the field here of the tech right, the trad right. Let me just check the comments here. Bannon, yeah, Steve Bannon, another important figure. Yeah, if you want to get a sense of the 2016 vibes, I'm just thinking here. This is off the cuff, okay? So this is not like, this may be not 100% accurate, but if you want to get a sense of the 2016 vibes, War for Eternity, the book on Steve Bannon, was a nice book written by Ben Teitelbaum. But, you don't get a lot of tech people discussed in that book, so that's kind of what's new. Let's see. We wanted to pull up another article here. Do I have it up on screen? Look, I was looking for it before the stream started. I couldn't find it. I thought, gosh, let's just do the stream without it. Then it came up as a link in one of the other articles, so I feel like it's meant to be. So let's read it. This is Tyler Cowen. The Change in Vibes, Why Did They Happen? Published several days ago, July 17th, and you can follow his work at marginalrevolution.com. Let me just say here as a general rule, those of you who know me know this, those of you who are new do not. When I do these live streams, I read other people's writing. I try to comment on it. I try to make it interesting for you. Okay, I try to show you something you might not have seen before, but the credit goes to the authors and to the publications. All right. So if you find this interesting, what I'm about to read, you should follow Tyler Cowen. You should follow Marginal Revolution. And so too with any article that I ever read on this channel. Okay. I'm bringing their thoughts to you, and it's giving us something to think about. And that way we all win. The changes in vibes. Why did they happen? Clearly, it has happened, and it has been accelerated and publicized by the Biden failings and the attempted Trump assassination. But it was already underway. If you need a single unambiguous sign of it, he writes, I would cite MSNBC pulling off Morning Joe for a morning for fear they would say something nasty about Trump. Guys, maybe you remember that. I believe it was the day after the assassination attempt, which, thank God, failed, and rest in peace to the person that the bullet did hit. Another way to put it is that Trump was a highly vulnerable, defeated president facing numerous legal charges and indeed an actual felony conviction, yet he now stands as a clear favorite in the next election. In conceptual terms, how exactly did that happen? Think back, guys. Things are moving so fast. Think back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Okay? I don't think you have to go 3 weeks. Think 2 weeks ago. When was Trump cleared from the legal charges? Then shortly after, he dodges a bullet in the most spectacular fashion, demonstrating courage under fire. Biden falls apart. Everything shifted quickly. And in conceptual terms, how exactly did that happen? I had been thinking, Tyler Cowen continues, it would be a good cognitive test to ask people why they think the vibes have changed, and then to grade their answers for intelligence, insight, and intellectual honesty. For instance, I used to read people arguing Trump is popular because of racism. But now that view is pretty clearly refuted. Even if you think, as I do, he writes, that racism has some marginal impact on his support. Or other people have attributed the development to polarization. Whether or not you agree with the polarization thesis, it begs the question here, as we could be polarized with Trump as a big underdog. In any case, I thought I should start this process by offering my answers, Tyler Cowen writes. Here they are in a series of bullet points. So we're getting his bullet points. So I kind of move around here. It's getting kind of sore in that position. I'm going to look at his bullet points for why the vibe has shifted. Trump and his team understand that we now live in a world of social media. Only a modest part of the Democratic establishment has mastered the same. What do you guys think about that first point? I find it kind of dubious, to tell you the truth. I mean, wasn't it obvious since Obama that we live in a world of social media? Biden's got his social media team. Kamala's got a social media team. I mean, maybe it's the influence of Musk's buying Twitter, but I don't know. I don't really get that point too well, personally. Number two, the Trumpian right, whether you agree with it or not. Well, by the way, the fact that I don't understand doesn't mean that he's wrong. There's something I don't understand about it. The Trumpian right, whether you agree with it or not, second point, has been more intellectually active and vital than the progressive left. At least during the last 5 years, maybe more. Okay, now I, Michael Millerman, strongly agree. Being fully on the outs, those people were more free to be creative, noting that I'm not equating creative with being correct. Yeah, guys, I think this is one of the reasons, to a certain extent, that a subset of you follow me in this channel, because sometimes I talk about Plato, sometimes we talk about Heidegger, sometimes we talk about Strauss, but we often talk about how these ideas influence politics, and in particular, the Trumpian right, okay? Darren Beattie, former Trump speechwriter, now running Revolver News, wrote his dissertation on Heidegger. We know that people on the right are reading books like Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy. Serious, thoughtful, interesting book compared to some of the things that you read among the quote-unquote democratic intellectuals. What? Every Baby's a Racist? That's like the hit book or something like that? Some nonsense like that? Okay, Curtis Yarvin, Carl Schmitt, Straussian Moment. People are reading, talking, thinking, discussing, whether it's whatever it happens to be. So yes, the Trumpian right has been more intellectually active and vital than the progressive left. I call that fact check true. The deindustrialization of America, point 3, has mattered more than people expected at first and has had longer legs in terms of its impact on public opinion. I would say this one is squarely in the mainstream account of the matter. Okay, you had the big theme of deindustrialization and obviously in Hillbilly Elegy itself, something closely associated with J.D. Vance, needless to say. But I think you also see it represented in some other Republican rhetoric. I take for myself a little symbolic indication of this when Glenn Greenwald was on Tucker Carlson. To my eyes, for the first time, it's like, oh, okay, you see a new element of what used to be leftist thought on the right, critical of global capital and so on. 4, many Trumpian and MAGA messages have been more in vibe with the negative contagion effects of our recent times. Okay, I don't know what that means. So let's see, an overly simple model of positive and negative contagion. When people feel bad and act badly, if only in rhetoric, they make others around them worse as well. That's a simple account of negative contagion of mood. So what does he say here? MAGA messages have been more in vibe with the negative contagion effects of recent times. Not exactly sure what he means there. Does he mean the MAGA messaging has been more feel-good? Or opposite, has been less feel-good? You can sort of get both. Think about that if you watch the convention. You know, Hulk Hogan ripping off his shirt. That seems like positive contagion effects. But talking about how, you've got, I was going to use one of Trump's curse words, but you've got, inner cities are horrible, crime is up, everything's terrible, Kali Yuga, etc. So I don't exactly know what he means by that point, I'll admit it. The Democrats made a big bet that trying to raise the status of blacks would be popular, but at best they had mixed results. Some part of this failing was due to racists, some part due to immigrants with their own concerns, and some part due simply to the unpopularity of the message. So I think what's that opposition to like DEI hiring? Was that the subtext there? The ongoing feminization of society has driven more and more men, including Black and Latino men, into the Republican camp. Yeah, I noticed that at the National Conservatism Conference, there was a workshop on masculinity. I think I saw, who was it? Not Balaji. Who's the other guy? You guys know who I mean. Naval. I think I saw Naval posting that the issue is masculinized men and feminized women on one hand, and feminized men and masculinized women on the other. In other words, the feminization of society is a thing, okay? Lomez wrote the piece on the Longhouse and First Things magazine, and just the general idea here that, hey, what's going on? Like, you've got good times created weak men, and now the weak men have all self-castrated, and what is this? Dugan talks about this, feminization of society. So yeah, that's something, okay, philosophically, theoretically, socially, culturally, and politically. The Obama administration brought to some degree both the reality and perception of being ruled by the intellectual class. People didn't like that. You got to think back to the Obama administration. Yeah, I guess the intellectuals were all in on Obama, right? Yeah, and George W. Bush was seen as a country bumpkin. And the fact that in Bush circles, Leo Strauss was a factor. It was like, you have, on one hand, you have the country bumpkin George Bush, war criminal, in their opinion. And then you have this Jewish Zionist, neoconservative, fascist, Nazi bad guy, Leo Strauss, in their opinion. And all the real decent, genuine, smart, cool, sexy, well-dressed and articulate intellectuals were on the Democratic side. I remember that. Point 8, Democrats and leftists are in fact less happy as people than conservatives are on average. Americans notice this, if only subconsciously. What do you think? Is there a point there? Democrats and leftists are less happy, and Americans notice that subconsciously. I don't know how you could argue that they noticed it subconsciously. What evidence would you have that they noticed it subconsciously? But yeah, maybe Democrats and leftists come off as, what do you call that? They're always complaining that they are aggrieved. The victim culture, There was that for a while. Obviously, there's some of that on the right now as well. I've indulged in it myself when I say I was canceled by academia. But typically it was the preserve of Democrats and leftists, right? To say everything's oppressive, everything's terrible, everyone's a racist, everyone's a fascist, everyone's out to get me, everything is bad. And, that rubs people the wrong way over time. Point 9, the relentlessly egalitarian message of Democrats is not so popular. And furthermore, since every claim must have messengers, it translates into lived practice as I am better than you all are vibe. Americans notice this. Yeah, there's probably something about that, right? I mean, it's fundamentally un-American. I mean, equality is not fundamentally un-American. The notion of equality, the doctrine of ideas of equality, okay, the myth of equality, the religion of equality, but not when it comes at the expense of liberty. Everybody knows what every American who buys into the American ideal knows that egalitarianism destroys the American dream. I mean, the American dream is in some sense that everybody's got a shot. There's equality in that sense. I mean, you could go hustle your ass off. Okay, the leftists will say no, right? You have a head start, you've got advantage, you've got privilege. You can't hustle and make it and all of that. And there's something to that, guys. You know what I mean? But yeah, the relentlessly egalitarian message of Democrats does fly in the face of popular American subconscious culture, doesn't it? And identity. The woke gambit has proven deeply unpopular. Okay. The crisis of the Great Awakening. Trans support has not been a winning issue for Democrats, but it's harder for them to let it go. Yeah, no, that's not a winning issue. That's a losing issue. But it's hard for them to let it go. It's a losing issue, and it's more than a losing issue. But Democrats have really doubled down on it. Where I live in Canada, the Liberal government is like, trans support is extremely important, okay? The sexual gender identity politics is extremely important for the Canadian government. By the way, I would love to see a tech trad alliance in Canada, a genuine tech trad alliance in Canada, a Musk-like figure, a JD Vance-like figure, a Trump-like figure. Okay, we're going to do well, I think, when Trudeau gets replaced, which is happening. The last polls I saw have Trudeau's Liberal Party being absolutely crushed. And that's good. Back to the list here that Tyler Cowen has in discussing the vibe shift. Immigration at the border has in fact spun out of control, and that's been a key Trump issue from the beginning of his campaign. And I write this, he says, as a person who's very pro-immigration. You can imagine how the immigration skeptics feel. Yeah, guys, you know that, don't you? The immigration issue is a huge issue. And it's not like Biden is inspiring confidence at the border. By the way, I haven't checked the news in the last few hours. Are there signs of life from Joe Biden? He's definitely not inspired a lot of confidence in America's secure border. And quite to the contrary, he's given the impression that America wants to import as many democratic illegals as possible for purely political purposes. 13, higher education has been a traditional Democratic stronghold, and it remains one, yet its clout and credibility have fallen significantly in the last few years. Yeah, in fact, they've fallen significantly since October 7. You know, there was the campaign. Yes, okay. More generally in the last few years, and more specifically in the last 8 or so months. Claudine Gay, Harvard, Columbia, the riots, all of that. Now, okay, obviously, the clout and credibility of the university have been a question in American political analysis for a long time. Alan Bloom's Closing of the American Mind wasn't written 6 months ago, 6 years ago. But yeah, higher education has been a traditionally Democratic stronghold, but its clout and credibility have fallen significantly in the last few years, leaving an opening for entrepreneurs to open their own online academies and offline academies, like, for example, MillermanSchool.com. But not only, okay? There are other people doing good work online, trying to take education out of the hands of the Democratic stronghold, restoring clout and credibility and quality and all that. The Democrats made a big mistake going after big tech, point 14. It didn't cost them many votes, rather money and social capital. Big tech, most of all Facebook, was the Girardian sacrifice for the Trump victory in 2016, and all the Democrats achieved from that was a hollowing out of their own elite base. Let me ask you a question. You're ordinary American. Is there such a thing? America's an extraordinary place, but you're ordinary American. They know something about Elon Musk, right? He's trying to send us to Mars. He's got Neuralink. Tesla, everybody's driving a Tesla. So many people are driving Teslas. He bought Twitter. He still finds time to shitpost, okay? He's all of these things that I think a person could see when they see Musk. And then they see Biden and the Democrats going after Musk, not giving him credit when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to electric vehicles, when it comes to space. Your ordinary American looks at Elon Musk, looks at Joe Biden. This guy's doing something, inventing something, dynamism, innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, industry, enterprise, invention. looks at Joe Biden. Would somebody please tell me in the chat, is Joe Biden alive? Are there any signs of life? I know there's the call, Kamala Harris. Hey, Joe, great to have you on the great to have you live on this call. I did see that. Various developments, point 15, in Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Israel did not help the democratic cause. Inflation was very high and real borrowing rates went up sharply. Yeah, that's another thing. Again, you're ordinary American. By the way, I think this is true outside of America as well. I talked to not long ago, I took my first vacation in a very long time, okay? First vacation ever with my wife after being married for a long time. And anyway, we were talking to people. Everybody, doesn't matter where they're from, they all could not understand, and I'm just relaying this to you, I leave it to your interpretation, but nobody could really understand why their governments were making their lives more difficult and at the same time sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and billions of dollars to Israel. I'm not saying these governments should send no money or they should send them here or there. I'm not even telling you my own thoughts on this, okay? I'm just explaining to you that people wonder. My gas is expensive. My bills have gone up. I can't pay my mortgage. Food has become a luxury. My governments lie to me. They abuse me. They rob me. Then they rob me again. And then they send billions of dollars to other countries. My cities are falling apart. And my governments are sending billions of dollars to other countries. You do not need to have a high IQ. You do not need to have read Plato and Aristotle and Heidegger and Nietzsche. You don't really need to do anything to recognize that something about that doesn't feel right, doesn't sit right. Something about that doesn't add up. I think that's true for anybody. That something about that doesn't add up. It starts to look like the planned destruction of the middle class. It starts to look like a project to hollow out the middle class, to reward your cronies in another country, to establish anarcho-tyranny or something like that. It just looks and feels wrong. And for sure, that's a part of the vibe. You might like that the government support Ukraine. You might like that your government support Israel, okay? You might like... I'm just telling you, right? The ordinary person's sort of gut feeling on this question, especially if everything for them is getting bad and their own region has problems that are not solved and their governments who are elected to help them are shipping billions of dollars abroad. Could we pull up foreign policy articles and foreign affairs articles and international relations theories that make some sense of it? Yeah, probably. Does it contribute to the vibe shift that says to hell with that? Definitely. So this is true, to continue in the article, whether or not you think it's the fault of Biden or Trump would have done better. Crypto came under attack. The pandemic story is complicated and its politics would require a post of its own. But I don't think it helped the Democrats, most of all because they ended up owning many of the longer lasting school closures. Yeah, Trump was in office for a bit and then, Democrats ran the show. And we haven't even gotten to defund the police. The recurring rise of anti-Semitism on the left and half a dozen other matters. That's part of the vibe shift. I'm sorry, but again, you're told by your government you can't go play basketball with your kids. They're like crime scenes during COVID, right? Blocked off, everything. You can't go anywhere. But if you want to go protest the right sort of causes, then you have the doctor's note. 9 out of 10 doctors allow you to go smash windows in the name of diversity, despite the COVID risk. Come on. People saw through that, okay? That was a disgusting moment, wasn't it? I'm not saying it's the only disgusting moment. It might not even have been the most disgusting moment. But it contributed to the vibe shift, for sure. Okay, defund the police and all the rest of it. In very simple terms, he continues, you might say the Democrats have done a lot to make themselves unpopular and not had much willingness to confront that. Their own messages make this hard to face up to since they're supposed to be better people. Guys, if you've just checked in, we are reading Tyler Cowen on the vibe shift, and he's adding his points for why he thinks things have changed. Okay, we're just going through a numbered list, reading it, commenting on it, learning from it, enjoying it, and so on. You might add to this, he says, 17, Trump is funny. He's one of the great American comics, in fact. All right. Fact check true, right? Trump is funny. And Trump acts like a winner. Now, by the way, oh yeah, okay, this is after the assassination. Yeah, Trump acts like a winner. Americans like this, and his response to the failed assassination attempt drove this point home. I saw that in Major League Baseball. You have players now doing the fist and the fight, fight, fight. Elon Musk credited Trump's response under fire to, as one of the accelerants to his open endorsement of Trump. That matters. You like to see it. You love to see it. You hate to see that somebody took a shot at Trump. You hate to see even more that he was ever allowed to do so. A lot of dark details there. But you love to see that Trump acts like a winner. You might hate him, okay? You might hate everything about him. But when he took a bullet, got up, pumped his fist, and said, fight. All right, Americans like this, and his response to the failed assassination attempt drove this point home, as Tyler Cowen writes. Final point, Biden's recent troubles and the realization that he and his team had been running a con, at least as big as the Trump one. It has become a trust issue, not only an age or cognition issue. Yeah, guys, people might have said before, is Biden too old? Is Biden mentally there? But now they're saying, what the hell is going on? This is a coup. What do you mean? He gets COVID, he gets yanked, he puts out his resignation on Twitter in a letter that nobody can verify. He doesn't speak to anyone for 4 or 5 days. Kamala gets pushed into the front. That's something more than an age or cognition issue. People feel like they're being scammed, and they feel like the scam is wide open now. On the other side of the ledger, you might argue, as do many intelligent people, Tyler Cowen continues, that the Democrats are better at technocracy, and also that Democrats are more respectful of traditional political processes, especially transitions after elections. I am not here to debate those issues. I know many MAGA supporters are not convinced, most of all on the latter, on the transitions after elections. I'll simply note that in the minds of many Americans, those factors do not necessarily outweigh the ones that he listed, these 19 that we just covered. Addendum, of course, there was and is plenty wrong with Trump and the Trump administration. You always have to add, right? Nobody's perfect. Just because you're saying reasons why people now support Trump doesn't mean that he's a man with no flaws and that his team is perfect. But the purpose here is not to compare Biden and Trump. Rather, it's to see why the Democrats are not doing better. If your response to that question is to cite reasons why the Democrats are better than Trump, well, then you're exactly part of the problem. All right, guys, so this was posted a few days ago. Tyler Cowen writes, I think quite a bit, at marginalrevolution.com. So you should definitely take a look if you enjoyed that analysis. Good points there, right? Why do people support Trump? Not because he's a racist or because they're racists, but for all of these reasons. The Democrats are blowing it. Okay? They're too in on transgenderism, too in on feminization, too in on complaining about everything, I think is one of the points he made, right? People are feeling the effects of deindustrialization. Trumpian right is more intellectually interesting. In my opinion, that's true. You may disagree, but in my opinion, that's true. Wokeism is unpopular. Immigration is out of control. Higher education is losing its clout and credibility. These are pretty reasonable reasons, aren't they, for somebody to support the Republicans? You don't vote for Trump, generally speaking, because you think he's going to be the next Hitler. Somebody probably does. I would consider those people a relative minority, okay? You might think he's funny. You might think he acts like a winner. And you might think Biden's just blown it. So, okay, good. I'm glad we had a chance to look at that together. The changes in vibes, why did they happen? And I've got one more article queued up. This came out of one of the other articles we read. So let's even just see. If it's behind a paywall, then we're done. And if it's an open read, then this will be our last read of this stream. Let me just see here. Hold on. See the video is playing. It's slowing me down. It is behind a paywall, so we will not do it. No problem with the paywall. Okay, but I don't want to do it now. So that's Wall Street Journal. Musk turbocharges Silicon Valley support for Trump. Okay, guys, so if you just tuned in, hour and 45 minutes into the stream, we covered some things about Curtis Yarvin at the start, Peter Thiel, ideas around the techno-authoritarianism. The possibly uneasy, but possibly very promising alliance between the tech bros and the trad bros, between the technological optimists on one hand and the religious traditionalists or conservatives on the other. We've had a look here at Tyler Cowen's article on the vibe shift. We saw Mary Harrington at Unheard writing about the same sort of topics. So good times. It's an exciting time, okay, to be covering these sorts of articles and topics with you. As always, I want to tell those of you who want to know more than just articles, okay, great books like Plato's Laws. All of this will help you to make sense at a deeper level. Here are the roots of political philosophy. Leo Strauss, who once upon a time, you know, if we lived back in the George W. Bush era together, we'd be doing streams about the neocons and the Leocons, like the Leo Strauss conservatives, okay, the influence of Leo Strauss on neoconservatism. Really just as a bait and switch to get you into Strauss, but still important. You should know if you're new to this channel that a philosopher who's also crucial, Martin Heidegger. If you don't know why, have fun discovering why. This channel does its best to help you with that as well. And that's it. Okay, I'm Michael Millerman. Follow me online. All the links are in the description. I teach online. I've got courses, Twitter, and all the rest of it. And good. This was fun. Have a nice night. See you tomorrow.